Is this card going to completely reinvent the current Pokemon trading card game meta? Probably not, but I wanted to talk about it anyway. This is Radiant Jirachi, and it made quite the impression on viewers during the 2023 Oceanic International Championship. This card didn't even have an archetype of its own, instead being part of my personal favorite archetype, the Reggie deck. Fans of the channel might know Regigigas is my favorite legendary, so my love for the archetype makes sense. But what makes this specific deck list so special to me is Jirachi is also my favorite mythical Pokemon. My endearment towards these Pokemon was obviously shared by Peter Guianis, who brought them in as the mascots for his run at the event. His boldness in spicing up what was a relatively set-in-stone archetype inspired me to finally make a video talking about the modern state of the card game. To start talking about the Reggie deck, I guess we need to look at, the Reggies. The face of the deck, Regigigas, is the glue that holds everything together. The beating heart of this deck is the Pokebody Ancient Wisdom, which makes it so if you have all other Reggies in play, you can attach 3 energies from your discard to any of your Pokemon in play. This applies to both basic or special energies, so in conjunction with twin energies, you can get a total 6 on any Pokemon in one turn. This isn't too crazy of an idea either, as Regigigas' attack Gigaton Smash requires 5 colorless energies to do 150 damage. It will also do an additional 150 damage if the victim is a Pokemon VMAX. This is a huge counter to decks like Mew Genesect, but isn't anything too crazy now that the meta is being run by V-Star Pokemon specifically. Next is the most common normal Reggie of the deck, Regieleki. 1 colorless energy allows it to use the move Static Shock for 20 damage. This is easily overshadowed though by its next attack, Terra Spark. For 3 energy, this move will do 120 damage and 40 damage to 2 of your opponent's benched Pokemon. Assuming your opponent doesn't have a Manaphy to stop damage to their bench, this is 200 net damage in one move. The only downside is that you have to discard all electric energy attached to Regieleki, but we know that isn't much of an issue thanks to Ancient Wisdom. Our second new Reggie, Regidrago, simultaneously brings in utility and heavy damage. The ability Dragon's Horde allows you to draw cards until you have 4 once per turn, as long as Regidrago is in the active spot. This is really helpful in the early game setup and to get out of a pinch if things really aren't going your way. Then if things turn around for you, you can use Giant Fangs for 3 assorted energy to deal a whopping 160 damage with no stipulation, other than those assorted energies. Moving on to the original trio, we have Regice. All 3 of these Pokemon will have the move Regigate, so I'm just going to leave that up there. For only 1 colorless energy, it lets you take any basic Pokemon from your deck to the bench. All Regis are basic Pokemon, so the benefits are pretty self-explanatory. In terms of actual attacks, Regice has Blizzard Bind for 3 energy. This does a fairly respectable 100 damage, but more importantly, if the defending Pokemon is V, VMAX, or V-Star, it can't attack the following turn. Assuming your opponent doesn't have an easy means for retreating, this can be insanely oppressive. If they do have an easy means to retreat, then you'll want to send out Registeel, who alongside Regigate has the move Heavy Slam. For 3 energy, this move will do 220 damage, minus 50 for every energy in the opponent's retreat cost. This makes decks that use the items like air balloons to lower retreat costs quiver in their boots. Less situational, however, is Regirock and its attack Giga Impact, which also costs 3 energy, but does 140 damage even. Unlike Regice, who makes their opponent unable to attack, this move makes it so Regirock himself cannot attack next turn. On this somewhat disappointing note, that's all there is for the army of Regis that this deck contains. In a normal deck, this would be all the Pokemon cards covered, and yet this entire video only exists due to a very special edition, Radiant Jirachi. Considering the most modern deck that I've discussed on this channel is from 2006, I'm going to explain what a Radiant Pokemon is. These are shiny versions of Pokemon with stronger attacks and abilities. Also, no matter their evolutionary stage, the card will always be basic, kind of like Pokemon V. Due to this, you're only able to have 1 in your deck at a time. Radiant Jirachi not only has some of the best artwork, best holo patterns, and best shiny color schemes in the entire game, but also has a really good Pokepower in Entrusted Wishes. This makes it so when Jirachi is knocked out by an enemy attack, you can take any 3 cards from your deck and put them in your hand. Considering how many specific cards are needed to make this deck run, and how easy it is to brick, this ability can be immensely helpful. While you wait for Jirachi to faint, you can look into using the most hype move in the game today, Astral Misfortune. 2 energies allow you to try your hand at 2 coin flips. If both come up heads, then your opponent's active Pokemon is knocked out regardless of its health. Just like the name would imply, the Cosmos would have to have something against your opponent to let you get 2 heads in a row, but that doesn't mean that it never happens.
Let's see if we can get another.
That's
and it
a head!
Absolutely.
More?
One more flip, and
Oh
it's
my
another heads,
goodness!
taking out the...
Oh
Got
my
one
God.
heads and another
Oh.
heads! This Jirachi is putting the whole team on its back right now.
Most of the trainer cards in this deck are fairly common, but considering I've not discussed modern decks to this point, I'll explain the highlights anyway. First is the Quick Ball, which as long as you can discard a card from your hand, you can find a basic Pokemon and put it into your hand. Discarding a card can be brutal in a lot of circumstances, but when you want an energy in the discard for the sake of using Ancient Wisdom, this card can be a win-win. Scoop Up Net may just be the best trainer card you can have in a Reggie deck. This card lets you take any Pokemon you have in play and move it back to your hand. This takes all attached cards, like energies, into the discard pile. This basically serves as a free retreat for an active Pokemon and allows you to put energies in the discard to then be moved to a different Pokemon thanks to Regigigas. It's like a switch card, but you get to use it on both the Pokemon and its energy. If your Pokemon somehow gets sent to the discard pile instead of back to your hand, you can use the Ordinary Rod to get it out. This card allows you to take any 2 basic Pokemon from the discard pile and shuffle them back into your deck. It also lets you do this with basic energy, but this deck chooses to not use any, opting for rainbow energies for the sake of fulfilling all of those tricky different color energy costs. Path to the Peak is a very common stadium in single prize decks like this one, making it so that no rulebox Pokemon can use their abilities. Considering rulebox Pokemon are inherently supposed to be stronger than normal Pokemon, this helps knock them down a peg. You need to be careful though, as this will also cancel Radiant Jirachis and Trusted Wishes, so you'll have to play patient and tactical to use Path to the Peak to its full efficiency. I wanted to do some honorable mentions touching on some of the most prevalent supporter cards in the deck. Even though they don't fit in my usual format, it's just because I haven't had the chance to discuss modern supporters up to this point. First is Marnie, which forces both players to place their hands at the bottom of the deck. You then draw 5 cards and your opponent draws 4. This is helpful if you need to refresh your hand, but can also be used offensively if you know your opponent has been using their consistency cards to set something up. Professor's Research, which allows you to discard your hand and draw 7 cards. This simultaneously can get some energy into the discard pile and save you from bricking. And lastly is Boss's Orders, which lets you choose any Pokemon from the opponent's bench and make it their active. If the hard hitter is in the active slot but the real mastermind is hiding in the back, this lets you bring them out and show them what for. This is of course not every card in the deck, especially considering how many one-off trainers Peter had, but more so an overview of the main cards and what is my favorite archetype and what was by far my favorite deck in the 2023 Oceania International Championships. Like I said at the start, the addition of Radiant Jirachi didn't exactly break the meta, but it certainly gave Peter Giannis a solid run, coming out at 45th place. You know what I say though? Peter may have been 45th on the leaderboard, but his deck will always be number 1 in my heart.